The data out there clarifies that there is actually an increase in STEM fields, increase in demand for STEM careers in US, Canada, even in UK and Australia. But for today's webinar, we are focusing on US and Canada. As a matter of fact, in Canada, Ontario alone projects the need for more than 233,000 STEM graduates to fill jobs between 2022 and 2030. In US, there's expected to be a 15% growth in demand for STEM careers between 2021 and 2031 of up to 800,000 jobs between this period of time. And same with Australia, UK is about 1.9 million expected growth in job demand in STEM fields between now and 2025. So we see the need for Africans to know about these growing needs. And this is basically because of the aging population in these developing countries and the gap in the jobs around the STEM fields. And also, when we talk about STEM, the typical understanding people have is the high-end STEM programs, which are right there on their own. But there are also STEM programs that are not so common. People don't quite get to know that they are STEM programs. For instance, there are MBA programs that are STEM designated and some psychology programs and all of that. So we have amongst us someone who's going to facilitate an expert in this field and also a partner who is going to help us to understand the opportunities that lie in this space. And he is the head of Africa Business Development at Mpower Financing, Munya Chiura. So Munya is going to take us on. So it's over to you, Munya.
Thank you very much, Iken. I appreciate the introduction. I'm really excited to be on this call. I'm actually dialing in from Zimbabwe. I see the participants from all over the world. And please, if you're from South Africa, AFCON, we know that the soccer is important. Let's all get along, whether you're Nigerian or South African. We all want, whether Tyler won the Grammys, or we all celebrate our continent. I know that I know there was the Grammys and AFCON have been quite contentious for our South African and Nigerian brothers and sisters, but nevertheless, when we talk about STEM, it doesn't really matter. I think we all have the same goal. So excited to be on the call. Really, what I'm going to do is I really have a few slides. I think Ikenna has already highlighted a number of the key reasons why STEM is important. And maybe I can talk a little bit about my individual sort of role at Mpower. So I support our Africa business development for Mpower Financing. And what's really interesting is if you look at my day-to-day job, in terms of what I spend my time doing, I probably spend 85% of my time in data, looking at data, interpreting data. And so you start to think about all the tools that drive that. It's tools like Tableau, it's Salesforce. I mean, all of these are software programs that are allowing us to do things more meaningfully and making very informed decisions using data. Then you put the layer of AI and machine learning. I can now talk to ChatGPT and ask certain questions, right? This is our reality. So it's not sort of far removed to in terms of what I do on a day-to-day basis, because data is king, right? That's gold, and this is where the world is going, already is there, and will continue to be moving in that direction. If you look at the likes of Intel and AMD and all of the different chip companies that are out there today, they need much faster processing power because there's a lot of data that needs to be processed, right? You look at cloud computing, the amounts of massive data that we use, so we need to be able to interpret that. So the idea of STEM is not too far removed. It can be the examples I gave of something very, very close to what we might do on a day-to-day basis. And so what I wanted to do is really spend not more than 5 to 10 minutes on an overview of Mpower Financing for those who are not familiar with the company. And then I also have a special guest who's on the call today, and I think that there's no other person who's well positioned to talk about STEM given his experience. I won't give too much away at this point in time, but there might have been something in the chat, but I'm hoping that I can also call on another special guest to give us some real live examples. He's got an incredible story about his life and how he's been impacted by STEM and what he's been doing in that field. So with that, I'm going to share with you just a few slides here around Mpower. So can you confirm you can see my screen?
Yeah, you can see it.
Okay, I'm just going to show my bandwidth. So a little bit of background of Mpower Financing for those who are not familiar with the company. We were founded 10 years ago. So April will actually be our 10th year anniversary. We were founded by 2 international students. And they both found it challenging to be able to support their financing for U.S. institutions. And in fact, on a number of occasions, Manu, who's our current CEO and founder, had personal experiences where some family members also had approached him the fact that they were $500 short of some of the tuition that they needed to pay for school. So this is something that he has taken very seriously as a business, and the focus from a mission perspective, I always talk about financial academic aspirations being very closely aligned, and I can give you some examples of why we view academic and financial aspirations as being very important in the business that we're in. So if one was to ask, what is the value proposition for an Mpower loan, right? So we are an educational loan provider. We provide loans primarily to students in emerging markets who are looking to fund their education. So when I talk about emerging markets, I'm talking about markets like India, Nigeria, Ghana, Kenya. A lot of the students or prospective students who are on this call would be qualified to consider Mpower as an option. So the two things that are important is that if I today went to any bank, whether I'm in Nigeria, Ghana, Kenya, or Zimbabwe, and I say I want to be able to lend, I want to borrow $100,000 for my education, you're more likely to be asked to provide some sort of collateral, a surety, a bond, title deeds, you name it, right? That's a very common way that banks look at lending. The other aspect of that is co-signing. So you'll find that maybe students are not good in terms of their ability to show and demonstrate that they can repay a loan. So therefore, they'll ask a parent or guardian to sign on their behalf. So that tends to be the two things that drive the reason why students might not qualify for an Mpower loan. And this is why we felt that it was important to really consider a different ecosystem. And not only that, considering some of our students are coming from emerging markets, whether you're in Zimbabwe or Kenya or Ghana, then we wanted to make sure we can support students in those markets. The company, we are very pleased that we continue to support as many students as we can over the past 10 years. So last year, just to give you context, we saw around 20,000 students who were able to support with an Mpower loan. And we've seen more than $4 billion of loans that we've been able to process across our ecosystem. We work with 400 schools. These are specifically schools in the United States and Canada, and we primarily focus on graduate schools. So I also want to be clear that our support is to be able to help a graduate student who's thinking about studying in the US and Canada. And then we've seen students from more than 200 countries. I support Africa, and I believe every key market on this call today is represented. So we're really excited to see more and more African students considering the options of an Mpower loan. So how do we do this? I talked about data. So we've developed data over the past 10 years, where I'm comfortable enough that if I'm going to provide a loan to Kelechi or Ikena, right, that we're comfortable enough about the fact that that student will be able to repay that loan. And we have a big sort of factor that we call future income. So what we are doing, and this ties into why STEM is important, we are saying that we're going to provide you a loan up to $100,000. We're not going to ask you for collateral. We're not going to ask you for a co-signer, but we're going to bet on your future income. Right. And that's, for me, very remarkable from a financial inclusion perspective, when you also look at the fact that we are funding students who never would have had the opportunity, right, to be able to transform their lives through an Empower loan. And we are betting on the fact that these students will do well in school, but they will also graduate and then they'll be gainfully employed, whether it's in the US or Canada or in their home country. So that becomes very, very critical for our ability to be able to support students who are coming from emerging markets. So I will talk a lot about ideal customer profile, but for this webinar, we're focusing on STEM, and a lot of questions are why STEM? So this is sort of a very practical example, and I use this a lot because I'd like to sort of give everybody on the call a perspective of why this is critical. So I talk about Adina. Dina is in Lagos today. She's making $4,000 annually in salary as a junior data analyst, right? And by the way, this is a real example. We can there time and time again where we've seen students have very, very similar journeys and remarkable journeys in terms of where they've come from to where they are, whether it's from a financial perspective or an academic perspective, but also being able to change their lives because of the opportunity. So you have Adina, she's making about $4,000 a year as a junior data analyst in Lagos. I've just sort of tried to give you a sense, and I could be off to my Nigerian colleagues on the Naira equivalent because I know that that continues to change. But you've got Adina who then applies to an Empower supported school, which is the Illinois Institute of Technology. She studies for master's degree in computer science. She does have $15,000 of scholarship and savings that she puts towards the application, and then we are able to loan her $40,000. So in 2025, which is next year, she graduates. And what's really interesting, and this is my only comment about STEM, that is something you need to consider of why we also think about STEM differently. So if I study a STEM designated degree in the US, I'm given 3 years to legally work under OPT. So that means I'm legally allowed to work in the US for 3 years before I either go back to my home country or I'm extended an offer from maybe a company that I'm working for. So we find that to be quite a very powerful reason why students should consider that, because it gives them 3 years of work experience. So think about the data science and all the different skill sets that you're able to sort of gain throughout that period, is that it gives those students a 3-year period. And then it also can be considered as a good path to work authorization in the US. So that means you might then move forward. Your employer or prospective employer might decide to then extend a job offer to you and sponsor your visa. And then there you have your work authorization in the US. But most remarkable is the salary scale. And $96,000 annually is probably on the lower end of this for a computer systems engineer. But again, this gives you a sense that you look at Adina, that in a span of 3 years, her life has been transformed. And this is why we, from the Empower perspective, feel very strongly about supporting students who are thinking about STEM designation or STEM designated degrees because of the upside and the opportunity. Now, I won't go through some of these slides because I think Ikenna really prefaced on why this is important, particularly for the markets that we support. So we have 400 schools in the US and Canada. You'll see the growth rate of STEM occupants or occupations, right? And people will say, oh, well, what about the tech layoffs? The reality is that despite all of the tech layoffs, right? And what tends to make the media are your big companies of Google and Microsoft. But in the US, there's a ton of SMEs and smaller businesses that are still hiring, and even the larger businesses that continue to look at the skill sets that will drive the business. And we still see this in areas like AI, data science, and machine learning, and we can go on. But again, this is why we are quite bullish about the fact that students need to really consider STEM occupations in the US. And the statistics that I asked pulled out was 3.5 million jobs in 2025, which is actually next year. So again, despite all of the fluctuations in terms of jobs, in fact, the last job report that came up from the U.S. government showed that there were almost 360,000 jobs that were added to the market. So always keep in mind that there's some very, very strong opportunities for upside, especially for those students who are considering studying STEM. And then I've just, again, given you an indication of kind of the annual salaries of students who end up pursuing STEM designated. Again, this gives you a snapshot of the kind of opportunities, right, that one would be looking at in the kind of salary scales. So I think that's also helpful when you think about STEM. And then what's interesting is that, again, you've heard a lot of noise around visa caps in Canada and that they want to limit the number of students coming to Canada. The reality is that, and Akina also references, is that we have some interesting demographics happening in these markets, right? So in the case of Canada, you actually have around 95,000 engineers that are set to retire. And those jobs have to be filled somehow, right? So despite the rhetoric, despite all of the conversations that are happening at the macro level, on the ground, companies need good people. They need highly qualified people. And that's why in the case of Canada, they had a very specific STEM designated express visa entry opportunity, right? So again, just want to highlight some of the opportunities that are out there. I won't go through South Africa, but I wanted to give people a sense that if one then decided they wanted to stay on the continent, you go and do your degree, and you want to come back, you still have fairly competitive salaries even in Africa. I know that even for students who might be from Kenya, I've talked to some of the big banks. They're struggling to find cybersecurity experts, and because of the demand. So those skill sets are not unique to the US and Canada, but we're finding that the demand for those skill sets are really across the world. So with that, I'm going to pause here, but I would like to maybe at this point in time hand over to our guest. I'm hoping Dr. Antoin, are you there? Can you hear me?
Good morning. Yes, I'm here. Am I coming?
Fantastic. Absolutely. So I'm going to turn over to Dr. Antoin. I think he's got a phenomenal story. He's also written a book around STEM. So I thought, what better way to have him give about 10 minutes of his time around why STEM is important. I think his story is remarkable in terms of where he came from to where he is now. And then at that point in time, I think we can then hand over back to Kenna for any other additional questions. So we really want to make this interactive as possible. So thank you very much. Over to you.
Thanks for that introduction, Munya. And yes, good morning from my side of the world for your geographic location. Good afternoon or good evening. And Dr. Antoin, I love that you kicked off and you mentioned data is gold, Munya. That's where I wanted to start it off before I even go into who I am and where I'm from. So what I do really is I try to empower, especially in the U.S. context. I'm based in Denver, Colorado. I try to empower our perpetually increasing numbers in international students and migrant, I should say, professionals, because the U.S. is consistently attracting global talents from all over the world. And employment projections for STEM fields, as you mentioned, is growing and increasing, and the STEM fields are wide, not just in the tech space that people might think of. I myself am a civil engineer by training, so I'm in the space of construction and engineering on different types of projects. Lately, I moved off from designs into project management as a senior project manager. But just to quote some of the significant data, I mean, MPI, the Migration Policy Institute, they've quantified that the cost of underemploying skilled immigrants nationally is heavily weighted on the U.S. economy. Over $39 billion lost in underemploying or not employing any immigrant, international student or migrant professional. So there's a heavy focus on the need there. Forward.us, another entity with migration policy interests, they estimate that international talent could add up to $233 billion to the U.S. economy. That's significant alone of itself. The Society for Human Resources Management, they put out a study that's indicating at least in a lot of these STEM fields, and especially in my world of construction and engineering, where there has been, even pre-pandemic, a persistent workforce shortage, surprisingly enough, they project that 83% of employers will have difficulty filling open positions, with 75 of those employers saying candidates did not have the necessary skills. And that's where I jump in terms of shifting private sector employers' focus into the legitimate pool of numerous international students and migrant professionals we have incoming from all over the world. And I like that Munya already has some of the U.S. Bureau of Labor statistics on screen. But to give my trajectory, I'm from St. Lucia in the Caribbean originally, worked all over the Caribbean with multinational consultants, worked for a development bank, multilateral development bank, master's Texas A&M. More recently finished a PhD at the University of Colorado Boulder, also lecture locally in Colorado as a guest lecturer. But my book really focuses on data to empower our international students. I speak to the education institutions to emphasize the need. So at orientation sessions, etc., when they bring in these international students, speak to them from the get-go so they recognize the opportunity they have beyond their 2 years in school as a graduate student to be more job ready for STEM fields from the get-go, to mechanisms like engaging on and off campus to expand their network. Because we come here as foreigners, we have a limited to zero network. Sometimes some of us like to stay to our culture and community. Some of us don't branch out off campus. But it's very important to network with U.S. industry professionals to grow your network. And that's where you get the ideal jobs from. Because sadly enough, I see a lot of Mpower. I got to say, I love their program. The more I learn about it and how they guide students through a path to success. But there are a lot of cases of students and non-student migrant professionals who they know the technicalities, they have great experience, great resumes, but sometimes it's just a cultural or social integration piece for them to learn the US jargon, network with the right people to get the right type of job. I see a lot of people in that case underemployed. What else I wanted to point out from my book? So in my book, I really go through strategies besides the data, emphasizing the need to hire our incoming international students and migrant professionals. I provide a lot of strategies that could help us be job ready and navigate that path, navigate the simple things, dealing with US employers that may be clueless to the immigration hurdles, the J1 visa, the F1 visa, the OPT, and all that we have to jump through. And I try to bring awareness to the international students or migrant professionals in terms of how to navigate that tactfully, in terms of getting the right job, getting a job at your level of expertise that matches your resume, and leading to a path to, if you want to stay in the US beyond the 3-year STEM OPT program, that you align yourself with somebody that would give you a work visa or straight away into the green card process. I hope I covered that in 10 minutes. I sped through that, Munya.
Wonderful, Dr. Antoin. That's amazing. Thank you very much. I think at this point in time, I just want to highlight a few interesting things, and then I think I'll hand over for any questions to Kenna and the team. So when we often think about STEM, and maybe what I can do is just share my screen to kind of give you a sense of what we are talking about here. So, okay, fantastic. So this is actually public data. And if you look at the Homeland Security, they actually upgrade or update this fairly frequently. And so there's always a ongoing discussion around what is STEM designated. So we typically think about, engineering, and we think about, computer science. But what's interesting is that when you look at these STEM designated degree programs here, it's quite broad. Animal health, plant protection, soil sciences, veterinary sociology, environmental science, informatics. We typically, always think about computer programming, modeling, applied engineering, architectural engineering, civil. I think Dr. Antoin talked about that. Civil engineering, transport and highway engineering, ocean engineering. Dr. Antoine, I know that's an area that you're familiar with. I mean, so it'd be important, I think, for students to really broaden their minds around what is STEM, because these skill sets now are being integrated into a lot of jobs. And I think having very strong STEM backgrounds, I think, will really set students up for success. So I thought that it would be helpful just to sort of quickly show you, when we think about STEM, nanotechnology, packaging science. What about that, right? CAD drawing. I know that a lot of architects do CAD drawing. In fact, now, that's the way you design buildings, right? Draft and design technology. Very, very important. And even now, with all this happening, climate change, a lot of discussions around hydraulics and fluid power technology, right? Yeah, so I thought I'd just highlight a few things. Infectious diseases, immunology comes up quite often. Zoology, but yeah, that's another one. Biotechnology. Again, heavy math and statistics. Statistics is a key. A lot of statistics that you do within your various jobs now. Applied mathematics, natural science, nutritional sciences, right? So anyway, the list goes on. My whole point here is that it's important for students to really understand that there is an opportunity to think about STEM and STEM designated degrees in a different way. In addition to MBA programs, we found that 19 of the top 30 MBAs, Ivy League, B schools, all have a STEM designated degree program. So this is where it's not just about STEM, but it's also about MBA programs that have a STEM designation. So I think with that, I'm going to hand over to Ken. I think I'd like to open up to any questions that you have for myself, for Ken, for Dr. Antoin. I think we wanted to at least be able to make it a little more interactive. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much, Munya, and also Dr. Antoin, for that, giving us a practical experience around this. And Munya, specifically for this document you just shared, actually, I was waiting for Antoine to be done to share the same document you just shared. As a matter of fact, I just put it up on the chat right now, so anybody can see the link there. So the link is on the platform, on the chat. It's a PDF document, so you can download it and see the STEM designated courses offered in the US. So it's just like Munya said, it's when we talk about STEM, people often say, but I'm not an engineer, I don't have background in computer science, mathematics, and all of that. And then they feel that they are exempted from benefiting from the STEM field. But that's not the case. When you look at this document, you'll find a lot of courses that don't quite look like the typical STEM courses, but they are also STEM designated courses. I even have a separate list I put up together for some STEM courses. There are STEM courses in accounting, right? There are STEM courses, MBA STEM courses. There is human resources. There are STEM designated courses around that. Marine policy and management, public health, sports management. So you think about it, it's quite a broad space. And I think the policy around it is that about up to 50% of the course program is STEM designated. So it could be around data analytics, could be around artificial intelligence, as the case may be. But this falls under STEM. So when you are thinking of STEM, just have a broad expectation of what constitutes a STEM program. And as a matter of fact, there are some universities outline some of their non-traditional STEM programs that they offer. I think I can't remember the university that offers sports management as a STEM program. So when you have that understanding, then you realize that you are not entirely off the radar for STEM opportunities when it comes to your career and what it is that you are qualified for. So having said that, we'd just like to take a few questions for Munya and Antoine. So let's see the questions we have on the chat box.
Hi, Ken. While we get ready for the questions, I did also want to clarify for our audience is that please do not leave this webinar with the impression that Mpower funds STEM programs and nothing else. Like we support all students, but the real message we're trying to relay is that why is STEM important? Why would I, as a student, as I'm thinking about my career, consider a STEM designated degree? This is where that goes, right? And that's why we've given you examples between the three of us around why it's important to consider STEM. It's also important that when you are applying for an Mpower loan, we will ask you that is your degree a STEM designated degree? And this is also where your research becomes critical. There are instances where schools or universities will list their STEM designated programs on their website, and we absolutely will do that research. But there are instances, for example, when you receive your acceptance letter from the school, but it does not necessarily outline or articulate the fact that you are in a STEM designated program. So this is where we might, as Mpower, ask you for you to provide proof, what we call proof of STEM. So that's just something to keep in mind, is that that has a very significant impact on our ability as Mpower to support students. And what I mean by that is that recently on January the 10th, we actually had introduced what we call a differential pricing model for our interest rates, meaning that if a student is studying a STEM designated degree, they will get a more competitive interest rate than a student that is not studying STEM, right? And again, this is because part of the algorithm looks at things like future income, and you saw from some of the slides that the kind of income that a student who's studying, who's graduated from a STEM designated degree university, they're able to command much higher salaries, which also helps all of us because we also want the students clearly to repay the loan, right? So that becomes important. So I just thought I'd highlight that.
Okay, yeah. Thanks for that, Munya. And so someone was asking at what point do they start the Mpower loan application? So that's a straightforward answer. You can start the application to clarify your eligibility at any stage of the application process, but you can only complete your application when you have gotten an admission letter, an offer letter. Okay. So that's when you can go ahead and complete the application. Okay. But you can check your eligibility. You can check your eligibility at any point to see whether you are qualified to apply for Mpower. So we are putting up the link right now on the screen.
So I think, Ken, a question that normally comes up is when can I apply for an Mpower loan? So, you know, I would say that what we're finding is that, especially for our African students, we really highly recommend that students start to apply early so that you don't get into the situation where you're not able to get a visa appointment. So in fact, the US State Department issued a new update around the fact that you actually as a student can apply for your visa one year in advance, right? So just also keep in mind those timeframes. So if you are looking to go to school in September of this year, you at this point in time between now and May should be actively looking at the schools you want to attend. You can use the UTM link that Ken has shared with After School, so you can start that process. Once you receive your acceptance letter or your conditional offer, you can upload that, and so then we can start the application. So just keep in mind those timeframes. We're also quite excited that a number of our universities, and I'll really specifically highlight Northeastern University, is that they've started to issue the I-20s much earlier than most universities, which then means that there's not as much of a visa rush. You can then adequately prepare for the timing of your interview and so forth. So that's just something to keep in mind, is that more and more schools are really considering the fact that because they're getting many African students, if I need to get my I-20 issued in August and I need to be on a plane in September, then it's a really tight time frame. But yeah, we do get that question often, is that when can I start to apply for an Mpower loan? If you've recently graduated or you're working, you're thinking about a master's degree program, this is the time for you to have explored the different options. And the 400 schools we support would be a good way to get that process going. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Munya. And for some other questions, someone was asking about interest rates and all of that. You can send us a message on our WhatsApp number, 0818445090. We're going to put it up on the chat as well, because these are questions we already answered on our platforms. And so we don't have to keep going all over that. But if you have specific questions around studying STEM program, how Mpower supports master's graduate programs in US and Canada, and related questions, you can go ahead and ask them.
Hi, can I see one question here that says, what is the guarantee that one will get paid? Get paid, paid job whilst being able to study. I can't see the whole thing here. Hold on, I'm trying to. So there are a couple.
Yeah, I think someone is asking, my background is mathematics, but currently I want economics because I'm studying economics BSc degree. Am I eligible for, am I able in US and Canada? I think what he's trying to understand if Mpower supports economics for graduate program.
Yes, we do. Again, I would highly recommend you look at the university you're attending and see if there's any STEM designated allocation to that degree. But nevertheless, we still support any master's degree program. So yes, that's why I prefaced before that I don't want any students to believe that we don't support any other programs outside of STEM. So if you want to do economics, I think we do support it. Again, you can use the UTM link to see your eligibility based on the school that you want to apply to and also the program. It will let you know what kind of funding we might be able to provide you. So yes, I'd still continue that process.
Okay. Someone is asking, does Mpower only support master's degree programs? Are PhD students not eligible?
Yeah, another very good question. So generally what happens is that if you look at an Mpower loan, it's typically a 2-year period. So we're looking for students who are looking to study a master's degree that's anywhere between 1 and 2 years. So we do find that there are students who come to us for funding, but that's generally because they've got additional funding. So they have a scholarship. We even have medical students who come to us. Maybe it's a 7-year program. They've gotten 4 years of funding from the university. They're looking for additional 2-year funding. So yes, generally speaking, we can support PhD programs and students are looking to go to medical school. It's important, however, to think about the eligibility being typically a student who's looking to study a 2-year program. Or 1.5 year, 1 to 2 year program, depending on the master's degree. In fact, a number of schools we've seen have moved away from 1.5 or 1 year programs. Cornell's a good example. Is they used to have a 2-year master's degree program, and then they had one that they introduced, which was a 1 year, and now they've gone back to 2-year program.
Okay. So while we continue, we have a poll on the screen. So just take a few moments to just answer it. Take you a few seconds to do that. Okay, so someone is asking about BSc program. Does Mpower support BSc program?
Okay, so I'm going to try to repeat this because I know sometimes the same question comes up. We as Mpower Financing do not generally fund undergraduate degree programs. And the BSc to me sounds like it's an undergraduate program. The only exception, and I will be honest, is that probably is less than 1% of the loans we actually end up approving, is that if a student has already left their home country and they're studying in the US and Canada, then we might be able to fund their last 2 years. So think about you having done your first 2 years at a university in the US, then you potentially can apply for an Mpower loan. There are also instances where you might be in your home country and you're looking to complete your last 2 years in the US. As long as you've got a visa, then that would be another opportunity where we might be able to support you. So for example, we have some universities we work with globally that have feeder programs. In fact, we have one university in the Caribbean that they have a specific partnership with a university in the US. So the student starts the first 2 years in the Caribbean, and then they do the last 2 years in the US. So that would be an opportunity where we can indeed fund it. But generally speaking, so I mentioned it's not a lot of our loans are in that category of a student who has a bachelor's degree program, or they're looking to fund a bachelor's degree program.
And also to clarify from our experience, lots of students we work with, the success rates for STEM programs are significantly higher than any other programs we've helped students to process loans for with Mpower. I mean, that's our own experience. Mpower offers loan across board to different programs, but from my experience, and I think this boils down to data, right? Because they want to issue loan to students who have high chance of paying back the loan when they eventually graduate and get a job that can take care of the loan. So we do strongly advise that students are seeking to study a STEM program when they are trying to pursue a loan, because that's loan companies want to get a return on their investment. And the data supports, and to a large extent, supports programs that have high demand, career growth, and job prospect out there. And that's why we tag this program as STEM, made it a STEM program. So we can focus and target students who are actually looking out to study STEM programs. And we've also expanded on that to let you understand that STEM programs are not limited to the typical STEM engineering, mathematics program, but it also extends beyond that, like accounting, business administration, all of that. So it's then falls on you to look out for the STEM programs that is related to your field of study, and also consider your background and what course or what program fits into your background. And then you, of course, ensure that the school you're applying to is supported by Mpower, so that you can go ahead with the loan application. Okay, so someone asking about bachelor's degree. I'm currently in my final year from Ghana. It depends on the university you are studying, if it's supported by Mpower. Munya, I think he's asking, he said he's in his final year for BSc program he didn't specify where. So if it's in US or Canada, in a university supported by Mpower, I think you could give it a try, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you should go ahead and use that UTM link. It should show let you know fairly quickly on what whether we can support you or not.
Okay. Munya, do you want to say something around the interest rate?
Yes. So the interest rate is anywhere between 12.99% and 15.99%. And then there's a little bit of a discount we provide if the student signs up for ACH. And then we also roll in our origination fee of 5%. So the way to look at that interest rate is anywhere between 13.78% to 17% APR. And another important part of the way we look at the loan is it's a 10-year fixed loan. And the expectation is for the student to pay the interest only for the portion or for the duration of while they're still in university. We'll give them a 6-month grace period. So think about 36 months of payments of interest only. And then after that, you pay the interest and principal. One really fascinating part of what we realized really helps students is that keep in mind that if you go to school in the US, we realized we had to help students build their credit score. A lot of times, if I'm a student coming from Africa, I land in the US and Canada, my landlord says, oh, you're from Africa, I expect you to pay 6 to 12 months up front for rental because you have no credit history. right? And that's a big challenge for a lot of our African students. So we realized we had to help somewhere. And so this is why we're very deliberate that if a student does receive an Empower loan, the expectation is for that student to pay the interest only while they're still at university, and then they pay the interest and principal once they graduate. And a lot of people will say to me, oh, how can I afford it? And that always comes up. I always say this is also why we focus on graduate school students. Number one is that most graduate students are permitted to work on campus. And maybe Dr. Antoin, you can comment a little bit about that based on your experience. Is that what should a student be considering doing if they're an international student, they land in the US? Where, are there any resources they can think about using or leveraging for that? The second aspect is that remember when we are requesting for you as a student to complete your cost of attendance. Your cost of attendance should include everything that's education related. So that means it's your tuition, your housing, your on and off campus accommodation, your healthcare expenses, anything that's education related, you should include in your cost of attendance. So theoretically, as a graduate student for 2 years, you shouldn't have any other additional overheads, right, that you need to worry about. So that's, again, the reason why we focus on graduate students, is that we also want the ability for them to focus on what they're doing, but also they have a certain limited number of hours they're able to work on campus. Dr. Antoin, if you're still there, you want to comment a little bit about your experience there?
Yeah, I can comment. Having lived that journey from J1, F1, OPT, H1B, etc., navigating these immigration hurdles. I want to stress just a few things briefly before we run out of time. As a graduate student, I feel you bring in more value, not disrespecting or being derogatory to undergraduate students. We all start somewhere. But as a graduate student, you have a higher level of maturity, a higher level of experience. A lot of us, especially when we come from overseas, and it's key to build a network to display that. So you network with professionals, expand your resources. Besides OPT, there's always the option of CPT, to do brief internships without using your OPT time. For CPT, the acronym is Curriculum Practical Training that you could do in your field while you were a graduate student. And then again, as a master's student, if you have the right program, have the supporting advisors, you could easily get into research assistantship roles like I did, and even teaching assistantship roles if you teach and inclined, where you actually get paid and they maybe pay all your tuition or significantly discount your tuition and school fees, etc. So there are a lot of options. That's where I fit in terms of helping guide people through these options, to navigate these options strategically. One thing I wanted to mention, just to stress the now, the need now. We talk about the projections and need for STEM, but a lot of people don't realize, I mean, you look at CNN or you just go to Google and look up the Infrastructure Improvements Jobs Act. Highly political concept, but the US government signed that act. Some people call it the bipartisan infrastructure law, really to rebound after COVID, right in 2022, flooded every sector from transportation, broadband, etc., water, with over $1.2 trillion of federal money. So looking at the path of that money flowing, it flows from the federal government. They've injected that into public owners and public sector agencies, the highway agencies, the water companies, etc. These companies now have a lot of money to build all the projects they dreamed of left and right. And traditionally, these people or these owners, public agencies, go to the private sector to look for staff in the consulting engineers and the construction contractors, I should say. So that's where it is a high need right now for STEM professionals. It's a crazy job market. So I would advise anybody STEM inclined to start looking at that. I mean, even looking at the list, Munya put up the social sciences qualified there, as well as a STEM designated degree. With that said, I'd say thank you for the time this morning.
Thank you very much, Dr. Antoin.
Thank you, Antoine. Thank you.
That's perfect. Thank you so much. Yeah. So, I know there are plenty of questions. You want to continue on those questions?
I think we have a lot of questions, but because of time, let's just take one more question. So someone is asking if Mpower helps students get a job after they graduate. How does Mpower help in the process?
Very good question. So Mpower provides what we call Path to Success. The way to think about it is it's a free resource where we do everything around being able to provide the student with visa, F1 visa preparation resources, internships. I cannot stress enough what Dr. Antoin mentioned is that the ability for you to physically be on campus and start to build a network. I can tell you every single job I've gotten is because of my network. And I think that's the same way I would think about graduate school. If you can get a graduate teaching assistant, that's where you start to build those networks. So we as Mpower do not help you find a job, but what we try to do is provide the adequate resources for you to be able to do that. We also do have partners that place students for very specific fields in STEM. But yes, overall, we're here to prepare the student for the future, but not necessarily find them a job per se.
Okay, thank you, Munya. So I think for time, we'll just have to wrap it up here. But then if for the links that we share, the link to the STEM designated courses in US, we're going to share it via email. And someone was asking about if we have a WhatsApp group. Yeah, we have a WhatsApp group already. So we'll share that as well. If you're not yet in the WhatsApp group, you can join. So you can ask questions. We can share updates with you there on the group. So that's that. And if your question wasn't answered, you can also reach out to us via the number we shared. If you didn't get the number, we'll also share it via email after this, so you can ask the question. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Munya, for the time. Thank you, Dr. Antoin, for sharing your experience with us. And thank you, everyone, for joining. So we'll have a recording of this. So we're going to put it up on YouTube and share with you. So if you want to go back to it and have a review of the discussion. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Bye, everyone. Okay, so.
Thank you. Thank you.